can add your comments to what we refer to as the chat room. The chat room is simply the comment area for this event on Google+, and it's the area right below the video window, and I think it says add a comment. So if you would, just add a comment there. Go ahead, just type in your own version of hello world or I'm here into that area. Don't worry, you won't break anything. Sometimes it does take a few seconds for all of the posts to show up, so be patient if it doesn't post right away. And then we'll have people monitoring that chat area, and we'll try and include any comments, ideas, or questions into the discussion area during the session. So we really encourage you to ask questions, share your thoughts, opinions, post what you're thinking, or as I say, even throw virtual tomatoes by using that comment box below the Google+ Hangout video area. So in addition, for the past couple of sessions, we've started experimenting with a new tool that allows us to monitor comments made through Twitter. So if you're a Twitter user, use the hashtag ATSULL, ATSU Lunch and Learn, pound ATSULL, and if you want to share your comments that way, then send in your tweets with that hashtag, and we'll try and include those comments too. So I think we've got a good session for today. Our topic for today is universitization. And so we're going to hear from David Wayne, Special Assistant to the Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs, and talk about kind of what the university's status and updates are on universitization. So David is to my, I believe it's left on the camera, yes? So just wave, David. And then to David's left is Jane Hawthorne, and she's also going to help facilitate the conversation. So, David, I'll kind of turn it over to you to start, and maybe you can give us a background. You want me to bring up the presentation? Is that where we should start?
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay. So, give me a second here.
Okay, well, good afternoon, Kirksville. Good morning, Arizona. And thank you for tuning into this. Believe it or not, there is such a word as universitization. I don't think it existed a few years ago, but I've looked it up online, and it does in fact come up a little bit. But I wanted to spend this time, first of all, giving you a little bit of background on why we are going towards this more common view of the two campuses and some of our remote campuses, and in addition look at some specifics that have happened as a result of that, and then really get your feedback and hopefully integrate some of that into what's going on. So hopefully this is a participatory thing. I will try to talk for no more than 10 minutes, something like that, maybe 15 at the most, and then bring Jane into it as part of it, and we'll go from there. As you know, starting in 1892, we had this College of Osteopathic Medicine that was started in Kirksville, and that was it until about 17 years ago, when it was decided by Dr. McGovern at the time as president that he wanted to open a branch in Arizona. Part of it was actually a portion of KCOM, but it developed into various programs of what became the Arizona School of Health Sciences. A couple of years later, then the school of, actually about 5 or 6 years later, School of Dentistry and Oral Health began developing, and still later School of Osteopathic Medicine, Arizona. But in addition to that, we had SHM developing, and of course in Missouri, got this beautiful building that people can see from their windows, if you have a window, and also the Missouri School of Dentistry and Oral Health hopefully will start in September. The problem with this is not that we're growing, but everybody has a slightly different culture. The difference in culture started probably more between Arizona and Missouri rather than between individual schools. So at one time, we heard things like, oh, all the significant positions were being housed in Missouri, and we were just a branch campus if we were in Missouri. From Missouri, we heard all the resources are going to Arizona and we're not being treated as first-class citizens. That broke down a little bit further into the silos that formed with each school, because each school had specific types of things that they had to do according to their accreditation and getting students on board and different ways of doing things. The result was that we were kind of all over the place. In fact, every year we produce a report for the U.S. Department of Education, an IPEDS report it's called. If we were to ask different sources for the same information, we sometimes get different information, and that becomes a problem when we're looking at accreditation. This is where the Higher Learning Commission comes in. Higher Learning Commission has said, we'd like you to be more of a university, have more cohesiveness. At one time, for example, we had the 3 deans on the Missouri campus report to the provost. On the Missouri campus, we had 2 deans. They reported to the president. So the cohesiveness really was not there. And the Higher Learning Commission, when they came to visit us, not this last time, but 2 times ago, commented on that. And the last time they were here, about 3+ years ago, they said, you really need to do something a little bit more in that. We had anticipated that was going to be a comment, and as a result, Dr. Magruder at the time set up what was known as the University-wide Assessment Committee, and it was to work with strategic planning. In addition, instead of having the provost on one campus, the president on another, the position of senior vice president, now vice president of academic affairs, was created, and a strategic planning group was created. And I think people are pretty aware of that and really what's happened as a result of it. We need to put this in context with what's going on across the country. And we've got several different things that obviously are occurring. We've got an aging population. We've got a lot of professionals who are very close to retirement in terms of physicians, in terms of dentists, and some of the other professions that the university represents. We have a real undersupply of people serving in rural and underserved areas, and we have, even in that, we don't have as much emphasis on primary care as we would like. All of this is part of our mission. So on the next slide, we talk about the education landscape, which is really moving into a slightly different direction. One of the things, as an example, is continuing education. Continuing education now comes under academic affairs, under the Vice President of Academic Affairs. We've always had continuing medical education, CMEs, but the aim is for us to start moving into a wider, broader area, and that's where things like interprofessional education come in. We're also trying to look at continuous quality improvement. Universities have been really late coming to CQI, quality improvement, whatever it happens to be called, but essentially it asks you to do several things. First, it asks you to look at what are the realities within your environment. Where are there gaps between what is and should be? And how do you know those are real gaps? So you're looking at really some problem areas, but the idea is to have evidence behind it. So in evidence-based medicine, this becomes particularly important, but right across the board in all our disciplines. After we focus on a problem, the next step is really to analyze it, to look at all the factors that make it the way it is, that give us an indication of where we need to go. From there, we try to develop a solution, and all of you have been involved in some sort of planning where solutions been developed. We're really good at those first 3 stages. We may not get into as much detail in the assessment process as ideal, but what happens often with planning, as a lot of you know, is we end up with plans sitting on a shelf. And this is where when you implement a plan, kind of going back to this to square one and finding out, okay, is this really working? And that's what the University-wide Assessment Committee really started to do, looking at quality improvement. It's in our strategic plan, and it's something that will set the tone for a lot of things in the future, because the Higher Learning Commission is now saying we must have continuous quality improvement as part of our environment. A lot of you have seen some of the realities of this in terms of the mission and vision of the university, and we have this vision of being preeminent, and we can only be preeminent if we are doing continuous quality improvement in what we do. We're looking at policies and procedures. We have all sorts of different policies and procedures. This is on the next slide, where we have certain policies that are really outdated, and I'll use one because this is a pet of mine, because we've been working on issues of academic integrity as a university for almost 3 years, and it still hasn't come to fruition. We have a way, for example, if a student is caught doing something out of integrity, the dean can assign whatever needs to be assigned to that student and maybe send them to the writing center or whatever. But the student can appeal whatever the punishment is for whatever they have done. And they can appeal in a couple of different ways. Well, one goes through a dean, then goes to a committee that the dean appoints, then goes back to the dean. Another one, we create a brand new committee, and they have to go through this whole appeal process. So what we're looking at is trying to make sure that we have something that will be consistent. And we have many policies that we're looking at that way to integrate. One of the things that the University-wide Assessment Committee decided, and this is really unique, when we got together for the first time, we said, wouldn't it be nice if, regardless of the discipline, that every student who graduates from this institution have some specific skills that are going to do them good when they're in the workplace. Doesn't matter whether they're a physician or a dentist or an audiologist or a PT or an OT or an athletic trainer or a PA or anything else. We really want to see them be able to communicate effectively. Obviously, we want our professionals to have good communication. We want them to know that they can work together effectively as a team. We want them to take care of themselves, so have their own kind of well-being. And we created these things called transferable skills. And what I'd like to do is have Jane talk a little bit about this, because the idea was wonderful. We were probably the only university we could find at a graduate level in the U.S. that was, in fact, doing this. The problem was that we don't have we didn't have a way to get the information, to store it. And that's where TK20 comes in. And I'm going to ask Jane to say a little bit about what TK20 is and what we're doing with this in terms of mapping curriculum, and then I'll come back to a couple of other things. Jane?
Thanks, David, and good morning, everybody, or good day, everyone. David, really, it's very easy to dovetail off of what he said, because when you talk about all the plans, all the transferable skills, the things that the university was looking for, it's very easy to say we want to follow this, we want to do this and implement it, but how do you document the process? And the two fundamental questions that always come up whenever you're talking about data and when you're talking about what the students are as an educational institution is what are your students learning, and how do you know that they're doing, how do you know what they're doing, and how do you know that they are learning what they are supposed to be learning? So what are the expectations for your students? These are questions that the University-wide Assessment Committee was asking. Do you have evidence of their learning? How do you use that evidence? Especially institutionally across the transferable skills, what David was talking about, those eight transferable skills. How do we know that the students are getting what they're supposed to be getting? What about program outcomes and goals? Almost every single one of our programs have an accrediting body that they have to answer for and answer to. And that's the only way that we attract students and can continue with the financial aid process. So we have to be aware of that. How does that work? And of course, that at the very granular level, it means what are we doing at the course level? Do we have the syllabi? Do we have the goals? Are the students aware of what the expectations are that they need to perform to? So when the university-wide assessment committee looked at that, they said, well, what do all the accrediting bodies have in common themes? Are there common themes across it? And actually the answer is yes, there are common themes. We have to have assessment processes that evaluate the effectiveness, and we have to take that data out of the binders that are on the shelves in everybody's offices, and we need to be able to do that. But that's also called curriculum mapping, and it's interesting that many of the accrediting bodies already do the curriculum mapping. Our programs are doing that. But how do we look at that institutionally? Is there any way for someone in dental to take a look at what's going on over in the medical schools? And people will say, well, is that even common? You'd be surprised that the language is very, very similar. Maybe they use a little bit different verbiage, but what we're doing is the same thing. And we need to make sure that all the measures that we do use are meaningful and appropriate. And again, that we're constantly using this. It's a cycle. It's not a process that you go through a straight line that we just do it and then we put it on the shelf and wait 6 years before we have to do the next report. We take the information that we have, like what David was talking about, and thinking about a continuous improvement. How can we better improve that? So when we looked at that, and the University-wide Assessment Committee looked at that, and they had the message from HLC loud and clear, the idea was that, well, we need to find someone. Surely someone is doing that out in the workplace and in the customer out there in the real world. And the answer is yes, there were about 4 different programs that were identified as being possible. And in fall of 2010, TK20 was identified at that time to be the most viable solution that would work for our university. So what have we done? What is TK20? A lot of people have asked me, what does TK20 stand for? Someone told me that there actually is something that's there. I just said, it's the name of the program. And they do have a history with NCATE, with the accrediting body for the teacher education, because they are so very prescriptive in how the teachers are accredited. All the schools are accredited, and the teachers have to have their certifications. So there were very prescriptive processes that start not just in the didactic area, but also in their field experience, what we would assume to be our clinical rotations. It would be the equivalent of that. So what we've done, though, is we put all that information. We purchased the license for that program, and we have start putting in all of the data that is fed directly from our student information system. We're not recreating the wheel in any way, shape, or form. We take extracts out of the student information system, so out of Campus View, and on a monthly basis we upload that information. We do it real time, having to do with Blackboard. That information comes from the student information system. But if you think about it from an assessment viewpoint, it's not necessary to do that on a continuing basis except monthly, because our students, once they're in our courses and once they're there, they pretty well stay there. We don't have an attrition rate that is anything to speak of. And their students are in their courses. The courses don't change a whole lot. We can talk about the academic calendar, but we're not going to go in that direction today, I don't think. What we just want to talk about is that we know that the courses are there, the students are in those courses, and we know the faculty who are teaching those courses. But when we did that, we also recognized, when we started doing the extracts from there, that there were a lot of data inconsistencies. And by that I mean the naming conventions were different across the university. Some of them put periods in their numbers, like it was I'm going to pick on APA, if you can excuse me for a moment. It was APA.600, or there was a number. And there were times that they changed it to a dash, or they changed it to a period, or there was no space. And when you're looking at data longitudinally, that's very difficult to look at something for any length of time and be able to evaluate that and make analyses. So we've we're cleaning up all that data. We've cleaned up terminology so that we have that. We've identified. It wasn't a matter of saying that we're doing something wrong. It's just there's a better way to do it so that we can take that data out of the binders, off the shelves, and really analyze it and be able to move forward with it. We discovered also that we have a lot of students with dual enrollments, and we're dealing with that issue. And we have also learned that there's a lot of things that we can't load into TK20, but we're working on that. But the information is valid. In other words, the information from Great Plains, for example, that to be able to put information so that the deans could say, who would be faculty members who would be coming up for promotion? Is there a way that we can put their information and data in some system so that we don't have a review of 6 or 7 binders, that when it's time for the committee to review them for promotion, you're not picking up a binder that is about 3 inches thick and probably weighs about 15 pounds, and the faculty members don't have to assemble that. They can assemble it in a digital location. And that is the information that we can put into TK20, and it does have that validity with regard to accrediting systems. So when you look at TK20, it's things that we can address that anywhere from the admissions process through the graduation on the student level. We can talk about faculty having to do with promotions or portfolios. And the things that we do have into TK20 today are over a year's worth of course and student data that comes out of Campus View. We have course evaluations for SOMA, SHM, and ASHES. ASHES, their course evaluations are called Student Rating of Teaching, but it is in a way the equivalent of what at the end of a module or at the end of the course, this is what we ask the students to give us some feedback. We have surveys in there for both SHM and ASHES. Both Student Affairs and ITS are looking to send out some evaluations and some surveys to their own staff, and so we're going to be able to utilize that information. And again, why put it in there? Because we've had, I believe we identified probably about 5 different kind of survey programs that the university uses, and the information that comes out of the surveys are important for the accrediting process. So we could put that into TK20 and draw the line, in other words, be able to map that this information is really important, not only from the granular level of the course, but it supports what the university's mission and vision is, and that is what the HLC is looking for also. KCOM is beginning to put all of their accreditation documentation into that. I've been working with Melanie McCauley on that, and they've made great inroads, great strides in going forward. They probably are not going to hit this cycle, nor will we hit the ASDO cycle, because they have a site visit coming up within a year also. But we're preparing for the next one because it does take time to get the information in. But the accreditation standards have already been loaded, so it's not that we have to go out and find them and accumulate that. That's already in TK20 so that you can map the information even from the course level again all the way through, including the accreditation standards. The strategic plans, the campus strategic plan for the university, and the curriculum maps, we're putting all of that information in there. The maps are a little bit slower because there's a lot of detail work that has to go into it, but we're getting there. So it's a step in the right direction, as I say every day. It's a step in the right direction. Anything that you can send me. We're doing a lot of curricular assessment as far as direct and indirect measures. So you're talking about the course evaluations or student ratings of teaching, but in the future we're going to hopefully be putting some things as far as testing or papers or things in there, because the bottom line question again is, prove to me that we say we're doing what we say we're going to do. And when we are admitting students and we're telling them we want you to be the best doctor that you can possibly be, and we're going to provide that educational model to you and give you that information, prove to the accrediting bodies say, prove to us that you're doing it, but we need to prove to the students that indeed they are getting the education that they need to have so that they can pass those boards, so they can take all the COMLEX, for example, or any of the other the boards that they have to sit for certification, and they have the information that they need and they've experienced the learning that they need to have. Part of that is not just the measures, but there's key assessments, there's program goals that have to be in there, there are portfolios that faculty and students can utilize, that again create, and they could keep with them as long as they have an atsu.edu email address that they have access into the information. And again, for accreditation reporting, a lot of the accrediting bodies have the same kind of reports. They may use a little bit different verbiage, but it is the same reports. And we'll be able to do some performance portfolios, and performance people typically think of in the artsy manner that, oh, gee, we have to have the picture. You think of an art student that creates this sculpture, and here's what it looks like. But performance is also that a PA student is able to take the skill of suturing, and that is an art, to be able to suture a wound, or to be able to actually, they can show something digitally. It's more, performance art is more than, I heard about one this morning about the woman sleeping in a box in one of the museums, I think it was New York City. But performance is that they actually have a skill that translates to the workplace, that these are the things. They not only have the knowledge to be able to do it, but here's how they do it, and this is how well they do it. So, but on the back end of it, for educators, it helps us create the data-driven decision making that we're able to make, the administration is able to make, that we can take to the Board of Trustees, who are also asking the questions. What is it that we're doing? And tell us that indeed we are giving the students what we're supposed to be doing. So that's what TK20 is hopefully, and it's enabling. It's hopefully a documentation of the process, so that we can be very proud and be able to prove that indeed we are becoming and will be the preeminent university in all of these disciplines. So, David?
Thanks, Jane. That's part of the universitization. Let me talk about a few other things. Going back to the University-wide Assessment Committee for a minute, their job is to assess students, it's to assess faculty and staff, and it's to assess the institution. We've done a pretty good job in individual programs with doing the evaluation of students and assessment of students. And TK20 is a really valuable asset that way. We have done less of a great job, and it's a really controversial issue to deal with at any university, and that is how do we effectively assess our faculty, how do we assess our staff. So that's something that the assessment committee is looking at, but it's kind of like walking through a field of landmines, and we'll continue to tread very carefully in that area. Institutionally, we've done a climate study last year, and some very good results came out of that. Specifics have been dealt with, but there's a lot more to deal with. And probably within the next short period of time, all faculty and staff will receive a very short questionnaire that Dr. George and I have put together to try to get a little bit more information from people that we can use as a baseline. And that baseline is going to go into this TK20 type of thing. One of the things that we're looking at, and again from the strategic plan, is creating a common calendar. We thought that this might take years and years. It has in other institutions that have gone this way, and the vast majority of universities are heading in this direction. But we're pretty amazed that 5 out of 6 of our schools will be on a common calendar within a year's time, and the School of Health Sciences has been working hard and moving forward. Our Board of Trustees have also given us some very specific things that we need to work on, and they've told us there are 3 key areas that we have to spend more time on. One is interprofessional education and collaboration. To that end, Dr. Barbara Maxwell was recently appointed to Academic Affairs to run IPE. She's been doing that for some time, both in Europe, in England, as well as here. And we've got a bunch of things that are going on in interprofessional education. For example, a lot of people don't think about the fact that if you want to spot a diabetic, It's a dentist who can often spot it faster than a physician can, or earlier than a physician. So trying to integrate, where can we be working together collaboratively to look at issues that we're likely to face. We've also done something, at least on the Arizona campus, which I think is quite unique, and we have what are called the posture police. And the posture police are physical therapy students who go over and work with the dental students to say, you know, if you keep standing this way for the next few years, you're not going to be able to bend over at all, or you're going to be hunched over permanently. And they really teach them some of the important things in physical therapy. We're doing a lot more of that. We've developed on a university level a competition of student groups around integrative type of programs where you can use your skills in a lot of things. But this is something we have to show the board on a regular basis, and they say it's one of our priorities. Second one is diversity. A lot of you have seen the white paper on diversity. We are relatively diverse in certain areas. We can say, for example, that we had the most number of American Indian graduates in a dental program in the history of the U.S. last year, and that's wonderful. But we're also underrepresented in other groups, and we want to work towards that, and we want to be culturally competent, not just diverse. That actually is one of the transferable skills, but we also want to make sure that it's reflected in the university. So that's a key area of universitization. A third area is really becoming learning-centered. How can a university not be learning-centered? Well, let me use the opposite. If someone stands at the front of a lecture hall and only lectures, and that's their sole means of delivery, that in fact is faculty-centric. It is not student-centric. It can be part of a much broader base application. And sometimes we don't recognize that that learning-centered is really about putting the student in the center of the learning experience and serving them as best we can for all the different learning styles, for all the different ways, whether it's hands-on or whether it's lecture or small group or Socratic, whatever methods we're using. And this is really key. Well, okay, so we've got these priorities. How are we putting this together? And Dr. Phelps has said that one thing that's extremely important for him is the creation of this center, which is probably going to be called the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. We tried to make it Center for Learning Excellence on the advice of one of our board members, and faculty, when you had an opportunity to respond, said, you better keep teaching in there. So we're probably putting that back in. There has not only been a white paper, but all the responses for both diversity and for the Center for Teaching and Learning and IPE have been collected and put together, and we're moving in that direction. For those of you in Arizona, you had visits from 3 candidates for the VPAA position last week, and starting tomorrow in Kirksville, you have the same thing. This is the academic leader of the institution, and we hope that whoever the successful candidate is will help in this effort to continue the universitization. It's a long process. It's different than many other universities. If you take a look at major universities and go to Harvard, the medical school does not talk to the law school, and the law school does not talk to some of the other schools. We're trying to get everybody on the same page. Jane mentioned something as simple as course numbering, and it seems like a really simple thing, but because of the history, these things have just developed in their own way. KCOM has courses at the 100 level. Well, graduate institutions don't have courses at a 100 level, but there was good reason when it started that way years ago. So we're trying to change these things around. Student affairs is a critical part of this through the registrar's office. Financial aid is important. There's so many little pieces of it. So we've talked enough, but what I'd like to see and ask you about is, what do you see, knowing that we're going towards universitization, what are some priorities for you that you'd like us to be addressing? And how can we make this process a little bit easier for you. The calendar, for example, for ASHS is an extremely difficult situation. They have all these different accrediting bodies. They have different course lengths. They have different start times. So they've been working hard on it, but boy, is that a challenge to them. So what would you like to see happen moving towards this universitization?
Excellent, David. Thank you. There are a couple of comments that are out there in the comments area that I thought I'd go back and try and touch on. The first one I think gets to a good point, which we've kind of framed it as HLC told us to universitize. And I think that that's only partially true. The comment was really, during our self-study, we recognized that there were some things that we needed to do as a university to make ourselves more efficient on the administrative side and to kind of prepare us for where education was going on the academic side. So I don't know if you want to talk at all about that, but it was really kind of a mixture of us bringing up those comments and HLC recommending it. True?
Absolutely. It really started with some of the HLC things, not from the last visit, but a couple of visits ago. We also are moving towards a new HLC accreditation, which is called the Open Pathways model, which requires us to do continuous quality improvement, but also looks at some of those university things. However, it really was under the direction of Dr. Magruder and others, and Dr. Wood at the time, who really pushed us towards really this important thing. If we're going to move forward, we have to take responsibility and ownership of it. And while it's important what the HLC and other accrediting bodies think, it's most important what we're doing for our students internally. And really that's where a lot of it came from.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Sometimes I think the administration people only see the administrative headaches that we had from the multiple silos, the different calendars, the policy differences, how we evaluate faculty and whatnot. So those were relatively obvious on the administrative side. But from an academic side, if we start talking about doing interprofessional education and being more learning and learner-centered, which is the next question we'll get to, we really have to have some commonality in certain areas to be able to do those things. So the next comment was about talk a little bit about the differences of learner-centered versus learning-centered. A lot of times we throw these terms around without thinking about one versus the other, but do you want to kind of just talk to that a little bit? What's learner versus learning-centered?
This was good for about an hour's debate in the strategic planning process between people looking at one versus the other. But the essential thing that we came up to agreement, learning-centered implies that we're a learning organization. Now, obviously, you'd think a university would be a learning center, but how are we learning for ourselves moving forward right across the university? Learner-centered might be focused on the student. It's sometimes referred to as student-centric. But learning-centered, if you read things going back to the fifth discipline and work by Peter Senge, he talked about becoming a learning organization. And that's that constant cycle that I was talking about focusing on what we're doing, measuring what we're doing, coming up with improvements. And one of the things that I should mention is it's really okay to fail as we move through some processes. We learn a whole lot from that. Sometimes organizations, and not necessarily our university, but I've certainly seen this, where organizations are afraid to try new things for fear that they will fail. But they'll only know if they try it. So the assessment committee has tried things, and some have worked and some have not. And right across the university, if it's truly learning-centered, then we'll be trying a variety of different things and seeing how we can improve.
Well, speaking of trying different things and how we can improve, one of the things that we wanted to do with these sessions is experiment a little bit. And sometimes we've run into a situation where having just one topic, it can kind of expand the session. So we were thinking about trying to add a couple other topics. And one of the other topics that we wanted to bring out today was also related to universitization, if you will, and that's the lynda.com enterprise agreement that we have. So I'm going to throw it out there one more time for any questions or comments for David or Jane, or just for people to think about on the whole universitization effort. And if we don't have anything else there, then we're going to shift gears and have Gene talk a little bit about lynda.com. So going once.
I just want to thank IT, because pulling this together is a wonderful example of trying out these technologies, and really the universitization is an integral part of this. So thank you to all of IT, and you particularly.
Thanks for doing it too, David. I mean, it is pretty interesting just to think that, you know, we can have this conversation like we're in rooms next to each other, and have, you know, upwards of 30 plus people watching and kind of participating in that conversation as well. It's a different kind of interaction that I think is right up that innovation alley that we're trying to get. All right, I don't see any other comments, so Gene, I'm going to throw it over to you, and you can talk a little bit about lynda.com.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Lynda.com is essentially a training library that you can access through the ATSU portal with what we call single sign-on. The training library has an unbelievable number of topics that you can work with. It does keep track of you as an individual, what you're working with, and then you can also print off certificates of completion. So Brian, I think, is going to walk through, I'll talk it if Brian will show it on his screen, how to log into lynda.com. Give him just a minute.
Yeah, give me a minute here.
It's really very simple. The first thing you do is log into the portal.
All right. So there we are, the portal. There we go. I have my authentication criteria. There I am.
Okay, once you're in the portal, you need to go to Resources, and then My Tools, and down to lynda.com, about 3/4 of the way down.
So I see it tells me that it's authenticating me, so I don't have to log in again then, hey?
Okay, so it's churning. So if you will notice, then it recognized Brian. He did not have to re-authenticate. It recognized him by logging in through the portal. You can see that by the Hi Brian there. So it's really simple to log into, and you can use it any place that you have internet access. And the beauty of the enterprise license, which we just purchased and made live last week, in fact, is that any and all ATSU faculty or employees can log into it. You don't have to wait for a license to come free. Everyone has immediate access to it through the internet. I'll just mention Brian, if you would click on maybe software.
Okay.
And so this shows you an alphabetical listing of all the software features. Why don't you go to, we all use Microsoft, so why don't you go down to the M and choose Microsoft, and you'll see there's 187 courses on Microsoft. So you can go in, and if you notice at the left, you've got Excel, Office, Word, Access, PowerPoint, Outlook, and SharePoint. So you can take courses on all of those, or any of them, and it shows you the number of courses there are at each one. You can see that Brian has lost me.
Sorry. Never
anyway,
give an IT guy a chance to play.
You like to click too much. So anyway, you've got all of those different tutorials. They're interactive, they're fun, and as I said, it does keep track of what you do, and you can print out certificates. And quite frankly, any of us need to brush up a little on certain areas. You know, I won't ask him to go back, but there's Acrobat, there's just about anything that you would be interested in to study.
So yeah, I think you can use the search engine up here too, right? To
yes,
just
yes, that
type
is
in the
correct.
topic. So
Do Adobe.
if we look at Adobe, then
So there are all the Adobe tutorials. And you can stop a tutorial, go back into the tutorial. So, you know, time really, if you've got 10 or 15 minutes, you can do a little bit of work in it and then go back out and then back into it. One thing I do want to mention is this has been a rather significant investment for the university. So we will be watching it this year, see how much it is used to determine if we will continue with the enterprise license. So it's very important if you do use it. So.
do you want to talk, Gene, a little bit about the concept that we've been throwing around of building cohorts on particular courses?
Yeah.
So one of the ideas is, you know, it's great to go through these individually, but sometimes you actually learn better if you have a couple of other people going through a topic at a particular time with you. So one of the things that we've seen some of the other departments or groups do is pick out a topic that's important for the entire area. So let's take the help desk, for example, customer service. If there was a video on customer service and learning about customer service, we might have 4 or 5 of our department members kind of track through a particular course at about the same time and about the same rate. And we think that's a good way to kind of expand the ability of lynda.com with our own tools that we have, so you can ask one another questions, you know, you can share information on assignments and learn from each other at the same time you're going through the course, which kind of gets back to what David was talking about earlier as a learning-centered environment.
Okay, thanks, Brian. The other thing that I've found interesting, there are some departments that are requiring their employees to take certain courses as part of their evaluation. So that would be one of the action points in an evaluation, is to go through all of, or the required courses by your supervisor. So I think that's a great idea. Are there any questions about lynda.com?
I see a couple comments out there, Gene. Most of them, people being pretty excited about the tool. Good for use as continuing education for employee and faculty. Good point, Corey. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good tool, and hopefully people will find the time or make the time. It's rare that we find the time. Make the time to take advantage of the tool.
Yes, that was exactly what I was going to say. I think if you would find the time, make the time to use the tool a little bit, you probably would find the courses would help you in your work. So it's a good tool. I think that's all I have on it.
Good. Yeah, we're looking for it, and looking forward to seeing how people use it. Maybe we'll start a little community out there where people can give some recommendations on what they've found as good courses or good materials or good strategies for trying to study the material, and get that conversation going so that we can continue to build that learning-centered environment as well as a learner-centered environment. So David, thanks again. Really appreciate the update on the universitization. I think there's some good progress that's been made there. I used to joke, really we've been trying to move toward this university for a long time. And in the Missouri campus, there's a water tower kind of in the middle of campus. And for the longest time, it continued to say KCOM. And so I remember joking with people that we would know that the university has arrived at a certain milestone once that moved to ATSU. And so that happened a few years ago, and we're still continuing to morph and try and find more advantages for taking advantage of leveraging all of the different programs that we have and all of the different services we provide. So
I want to say that I think it's really significant how much people have contributed to this effort. I look at the different schools and what they've done in integrating curriculum. I've looked at the different services that have been around. So we're really a lot further ahead than most universities this way. We sometimes think that the pace of change is very slow, but people have been doing a great job.
yeah, I agree. In the fact that we as a university are all so focused on healthcare, I think that really lends something to this whole idea. It's not like you said earlier, the law school talking to the math department. That's a little bit tougher to make some of those cases, between undergrad and graduate, but certainly for healthcare and the team approach and interprofessional, there's a lot that we can do there. So thanks again, David.
Brian,
Thanks,
it
Jean.
looks like we have one last question for David. If
Oh, good.
Get that in.
Yep, I see it there, Helen. David, you allude to the glacier speed of change. How can we change the culture throughout the university so to promote resistance to change and stagnation? How can we speed things up? How can we change the culture? I think that's the question.
Well, amphetamines work. Seriously, I think part of it is a little bit of risk taking and willingness to do that, and I see as we have new administration that's something that there's good listening for it, and we can move forward that way. I think that change will always move, for those of us who want it to happen quickly, slower than we would like. But I think, one of the things is for us in whatever area we work in to be as transparent as possible. If we're transparent, then, and people know what direction we're going and have input into it, then I think we can move a lot faster than we have.
Yeah, good point. And David, I see Jean signed off, so if you'd pass the thanks on to her too, that would be great.
She's right beside me.
I got lost.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.